Welcome! In this video we'll be taking a quick look at Kai, a epic grade DPS class Elune. Looking at his base stats, he has 26k and 4.8k attack, as well as 2.6k physical defense and 2.5k magic defense. His attack speed at 109 puts him at a decent speed, as long as an increased crit stat. As Kai is transcended up to the max at +5, his HP becomes a very nice 39k, with his attack ending at 7.2k and his magic and physical defense being at 3.8 and 4k respectively. Moving on to his first skill, the two-handed slash. This is a physical damage skill targeting the front line only, and deals 120 plus 110% of his attack as physical damage. As the skill is increased up to the max at +6, it goes up to a 930 plus 158% of his attack stat as physical damage. This is a pretty basic and generic first skill for most Elunes, as they do not do anything else or have anything else other than just a damage. Kai's special skill. This is a nice skill for him and one of his best uses. This one is Leaping Assault. This one deals 200 plus 170% of his attack as physical damage, and an additional damage equal to 10% of the target's existing HP. The amount of additional damage inflicted will not exceed that of 50% of Kai's attack. This means that when you're attacking bosses, he will deal a very nice amount of damage, as it will be based on their existing HP, and they typically have high HP. The limiting factor here will be Kai's attack, so the more attack you put on him, the better. As the skill is leveled up to the max at 6, it deals a very nice base damage of 1430 plus 241% of his attack. The additional damage also increases to 20% of the target's existing HP. Again, this is limited by the fact that it cannot exceed more than 50% of his attack. This means that you need to have a good amount of attack on this skill, as the skill's first damage will be based on his attack and do nice damage. The second one is going to be based on the target's max HP, but cannot exceed more than 50% of his attack, and that is a buffed attack. So if you run him with a Wei to give him that additional attack buff, then the amount of additional damage he can do increases. Moving to the ultimate skill, his ultimate skill is again just a frontline only skill like all of his. This one deals 320 plus 280% of attack as physical damage. This is a very nice hard-hitting skill. The damage increases by 20% on targets with less than 50% HP. So as the target gets lower in HP and below 50%, this skill will do 20% more damage, which is very nice. As the skill is leveled up to a max of 6, the damage goes to a very high 1960 plus 396% of his physical attack, and the bonus in damage increases by 40% on targets with less than 50% HP, making the skill hit very hard, especially on lower HP targets. The passive number 1. This one increases damage inflicted by 5% for each successive attack on the same target. Damage dealt can be increased up to 20%. This means the more that you hit the same target, the more damage you can do, up to a total of 20% increased damage. This makes him very good, as he only attacks frontline targets. He is able to hit bosses and continue hitting the bosses harder and harder as the fight goes on. His second passive, when a single attack of his lands as a crit, his attack increases by 15% for 2 turns, meaning that if you have a decent crit rate or a crit buff for Kai to allow him to land those attacks as crits, then he will have an additional attack increase by 15%, as well as any attack buffers that you bring with him, making his attacks even harder and giving him the ability to do even more damage. Looking in at his third passive, this one increases the attack and crit rate by 20% when his HP goes below 50%. This makes it so that as his HP goes down, once it hits below 50%, he will have even more attack power and critical rate. This is something hopefully you will not be using too much, but as he is an epic Elune and his base stats are typically low, mainly his physical and magic defense, this might be something that happens to you, but then you can just heal him back up, and then for that time that he is low, he does do more damage. Looking over at his skill gems, his first skill, the recommended is red, red, and orange, which is physical and crit at the end. This skill, as it is a basic attack only skill, the bonus that you would get for this skill gem set is a 5% chance to stun the target for 1 turn. As the skill typically will not be used that much, it really doesn't matter which one you go with this. You can either stick with the recommended, the red, red, orange, and give this skill some type of effect that has a low chance of happening, but at least it's something, which is the 5% chance to stun. Whereas otherwise, if you wanted to go for a more damaging route, then you could go with a full red to give him the high amount of physical damage, or full orange, or a mix of those to give him higher crit rate or physical damage if you prefer. His second skill, this one, the skill gem set again is red, red, and orange for physical damage plus 1 crit. This one also has a very low chance of causing an effect. This chance is chance of reducing the target's physical defense by 10% for 2 turns. While this is the skill that you will be spamming the most on a target, especially those boss fights, which is primarily going to be Kai's use, this chance is low to do it, but as you will be using this skill constantly, you do have a chance of reducing their physical defense, and in many cases with bosses with high physical defense, that can be somewhat helpful. However, you can also go with a higher crit rate on this skill, or you can go with more damage with the physical. Most of the damage of this skill is going to be coming from the bonus damage, which is based on their HP and does not crit. Going with the recommended just to have the extra chance of physical defense is something pretty nice. The ultimate skill, the recommended for this skill gem set is red, orange, orange, which is physical crit, crit. This one, when you get the bonus, gives a 10% chance of instantly killing a target when you land a crit. As this is a low chance, still at 10%, and it is on the ultimate skill, it is something noteworthy. However, especially when progressing through adventure stages and trying to take out those bosses in some of the fights, if you don't have anything else that has the instant kill ability, this is something that might make those boss fights a little bit faster if you do get lucky with this. If, however, you do not, then the recommended is still not bad, as it gives physical and critical increase, and this skill does hit very hard anyway. Looking at the dimension slate for him, stats that you would primarily want to focus on, as he is a DPS class, you would want to go with attack, as much attack as possible, because of his scaling for his second skill, doing damage based on the maximum 50% of his attack for that additional damage to bosses. Kai's primary usage will be going against those bosses to help nuke them down as fast as possible. Giving him as much attack as possible is recommended. Having the higher crit and crit power does help, as he is a DPS. He does not really need accuracy. Speed isn't too much of a concern. However, additional HP or physical and magic defense would help him with survivability against those bosses. Gear selections for Kai can be various different things. Recommended gear selections might be the Baron J set for the increased damage, especially if they have a weaken effect on them to get more of those crits, or you can go with the DPS set, which is one of the newer sets, just to have that increased attack and crit rate. Another idea might be going with the Great Spirit set just to have those chances of getting those additional turns as well as the increased speed when attacking bosses so that you can use his skill 2 more often to take down the boss quickly. He does not necessarily need tanky stats as his HP is quite decent for an epic. He does not need to go with an HP in his offhand slot and can just focus on attack, giving him more attack, allowing him to do much more damage when dealing with bosses using his skill 2. Kai is primarily going to be used for PvE situations, though he does have some usages in PvP. They are very limited and usually only at early game. At later stages, you're not going to want to be using him for PvP, as in most cases his damage and his utility isn't going to be much when compared to what you're having to fight against. Kai is a very good unit for early game and something you would probably want to get to help you with those boss fights early to take them down, as he is a very good physical damage DPS, especially for bosses to take them down quickly. His base HP being at a pretty decent amount for a epic DPS, it does help him survive against those bosses, as well as his HP scaling for his second skill and the high damage of the third. That's going to be it for this one. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below and I'll answer them as soon as possible. Thank you.